Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dan Lanning, the Oregon Ducks have emerged once again as a top contender for one of the more coveted players in the transfer portal in Tulane running back Makai Hughes. You won't find many running backs that have been more productive over the last two seasons than Makai Hughes coming from Tulane. And I think it's a little bit of a question mark. What Oregon's running back room is going to look like in 2025. Jordan James might come back, but he's certainly playing himself into the NFL draft. I think you can say the same thing for Noah Whittington. Dan Lanning, we say this all the time. Like, Dan Lanning's going to turn over every stone to make this roster as good as it can be every single season. And even as Oregon has plenty of business to handle in the 2024 season, they will still be trying to maximize this roster in 2025 as well. And Makai Hughes would play a massive role in it. Now, I want to get into Makai Hughes and kind of talk about what kind of running back he is and why I think it makes a lot of sense for Oregon. I think, secondly, kind of open up the conversation of where else Oregon might be looking in the transfer portal. We haven't talked a ton of Oregon as it pertains to the transfer portal because they're still playing in the college football playoffs, but they've been a program that's really done some good work in the transfer portal as well. Want to get into Makai Hughes, talk about what other positions I think still want to be addressed for this Oregon program. Now, before we get into it, as always, to the Oregon fans, whether we're talking this football team in 2024, whether we're talking the recruiting trail, the transfer portal, it's ever since Dan Lanning has taken over, been a blast talking about this program. The amount of support y'all continue to show to the fellas means the absolute world. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. I think secondly, let it fly in the comment section in terms of, what positions might you want to see Oregon go out and address in the transfer portal as well. Without further ado, let's start with Makai Hughes and then get into the conversation of some other positions that Oregon, might want to be addressing. Makai Hughes, to me, kind of reminds me of Blake Corum, and as a Michigan fan, he's listed at 5'11", 205. He don't look that tall on the football field. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because you turn on the film with Makai Hughes, the overall feel for the position is so high with this kid. I mean, his patience, his vision, how he sets up his blocks, how he makes second level defenders miss. The only thing that might not be really, really good for Makai Hughes is probably the long speed. And it's not me getting up here and saying he's slow by any means. I mean, he's a guy that had over 36 carries that went for 10 plus yards. Like, he can make it happen from an explosive play standpoint, but it might not be elite. Everything else with Makai Hughes on the film, it checks out. We talked about the vision in the field. I think another thing I love about Makai Hughes is the contact balance. He's a shorter running back with a thick lower half and deals with contact exceptionally well. Again, kind of like Blake Corum, stature might not necessarily be big, but I mean, it's a strong, strong body compact into a little bit of a smaller frame. And because he's a little bit shorter, I mean, the contact balance is elite with Makai Hughes. He just doesn't go down. Taking a look at the numbers in terms of how he deals with contact, in the 2024 year, he ran for 1,400 yards. Very, very productive season for Makai Hughes. Over 1,000 of those yards came after contact. He forced 62 missed tackles. And this is a guy that does really good work breaking tackles. And then he can give you the hard yards, as we're talking about. When he gets to the second level, the short area quicks are really, really good. I mean, whether it's a linebacker in the hole, whether it's a safety at the next level, he can make those guys miss routinely. And, although at times gets caught from behind, he's going to hit chunk plays routinely. But you kind of know he's not going to have negative plays. He's going to run hard between the tackles. He's going to give you juice at the second level. This is a running back that you start going down the checklist for and say it's check, 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 check. He doesn't really miss any boxes. And obviously his brother's Naheem Offord, who's going to Oregon as well. This one makes a lot of sense from a personnel standpoint. This one makes a lot of sense. We talk about this all the time. I feel like everybody, because the quarterback play has been so good for Oregon, you kind of view this offense, if you don't watch them that much, as this pass first offense. And yeah, they're going to lean into guys like Bo Nix and Dylan Gabriel when they have those kind of quarterbacks. This is a team that why they've been so successful over the last couple of years on offense is how balanced they are. They've had some of the better rushing attacks over the last couple of years as well. It starts with the offensive line, but you need the quality running backs. And we see what Bucky Irving's doing in the NFL. We've seen what Jordan James has done. I think one of the most underrated backs that you see in the country. This would make a lot of sense, and it looks like Makai Hughes as Oregon's kind of emerged as probably the lead team to land the commitment of Makai Hughes, which I think would make a lot of sense. Now, getting into the other positions, I don't think you'd use the word of concern because there's no positions on this roster going into 2025 that you're concerned about. But it's just like, hey, how many positions can we get to national championship caliber? There's been a lot of talk about the quarterback spot. And, Quinn Ewers hitting the portal and then Oregon going out and getting him. That would be stunned if that's the thing. So I think there's a lot of people within that Oregon program that, one, you got two really good quarterbacks joining this program in the 2025 recruiting class, but you also have some really good young quarterbacks on this roster too, right? Dante Moore, Austin. In Austin, it's like I feel like Dan Lanning's feeling pretty good about what the quarterback room is. Now, if he feels like it needs to be addressed, well, we never put it past Dan Lanning to go out and address the quarterback spot, but I think that's kind of been an overblown narrative that people have been pushing this transfer portal cycle, that Oregon's kind of lurking for a quarterback, because I think they have their answers on their roster at the quarterback spot. I think they brought in a guy like Dante Moore for this exact situation where, hey, DG balls out in 2025 or 2024, puts us in a really good position to win a national championship. Dante Moore's the guy in 2025. And I think that's still the track that this quarterback room is going to. Outside of that, we've talked about the wide receiver position. They kick the tires on a guy like Jonte Cook. We know if Oregon wants to go out and get a wide receiver, there's no doubt in my mind they will. I look at it and say, I just don't know if you need to. You got so much young talent that's waiting for an opportunity. And I don't know how many wide receivers in the transfer portal are head and shoulders better than guys like Jurion Dickey and Jeremiah McClellan. You haven't seen as much of them because you got guys like Tez and Evan Stewart and Trayshawn Holden. But I think what you can get the sense is, hey, there were a lot of good wide receivers in the portal. If Oregon wanted to go out and get one, they certainly could have. I think their lack of aggression with wide receivers, I think, is a direct result of, hey, we feel damn good about the wide receivers that we have on this roster going into 2025. Not to mention a guy like DeCorian Moore coming in as a freshman. The position that I think Oregon will try to address is going to continue to be the inside of the defensive line. And you go out and do it in a big way with Bear Alexander. David Gust, to me, makes a ton of sense too, right? West Coast kid has balled out at Washington State the last couple of years. To me, the best available interior defensive lineman. He's considering staying at Washington State. He's considering taking a visit to Oklahoma State. This is a guy that if Oregon wants, I think they can go out and get. I think it largely comes down to, all right, how do we feel about Amari Washington? How do we feel about guys like Aiden Breland and Jericho Johnson? Yeah, they landed Bear because I think that's a unique opportunity to go and get a game wrecker. You still want to replace guys like Derek Harmon and Jamari Caldwell. The answers might be on this Oregon roster, who just aren't playing as much because Harmon and Caldwell have been so good. If they want to go address it, I think David Gusta from Washington State, a guy that has played so much. That's always something I look for defensive linemen. Like, how much are they playing? Played almost 600 snaps in 12 games for this Washington State team. What does that tell us? That tells us they didn't want to take David Gusta off the football field. This is an all-conference caliber guy, and we'll see if Oregon wants to address the interior defensive line. The last position that I see as, I don't even know if I call it a glaring need, but I think with Boss and Betcher leaving the program after this year, you probably want to bring in another experienced linebacker. You've seen Oregon go after some linebackers. I think the problem here is there just haven't been that many great off-ball linebackers. I think Kendall Daniels would be an interesting one. Former top 50 national prospect coming out of high school, was thought of as a safety. That's kind of where he started his career, but has worked his way up, put on some weight, now kind of playing that off-ball linebacker role, and I think it fits. And we talk about this all the time. Dan Lanning, it's very clear what he wants in his backers, like really athletic guys. Kendall Daniels at 6'4", 235. He is the kind of athlete that Dan Lanning's looking for. And I think it makes a ton of sense. You look at where the modern era of college football is going. We talked about the keys to the game against Ohio State. And we talked about a guy like Devin Jackson with his athleticism and speed playing a massive role to stop the best offenses in the country that have a ton of speed. You need athletic linebackers. Kendall Daniels is that kind of guy, has played over 2,200 snaps, over 240 tackles, that juiced up athletic linebacker that's played a lot of football during his career. So he checks off that experience. That make a lot of sense. And he rushes the passer elite. And Oregon wants to send their backers on blitzes plenty. Kendall Daniels can do that, whether it's the A or B gap, whether it's coming off the edge. To me, this one would make a lot of sense. And the last name that just hit the portal yesterday, Oklahoma linebacker Lewis Carter. Young cat hasn't played a ton of football during his first 2 years at Oklahoma, but I know for a fact this guy was very coveted within that Oklahoma program. This was not one of those guys that Oklahoma fans were comfortable losing in the portal. I think there's a lot of potential here with Lewis Carter. Now, is he the ideal candidate for a linebacker in the portal? Probably not, because the experience isn't quite there. This is a guy I certainly could see Oregon taking a shot on, because if he hits, could be a dang good linebacker for this Oregon Ducks program. Outside of that, like you look at this roster, and we talk about it all the time. On paper, it's losing a lot of good players. You got a lot of good players who aren't playing for this Oregon team right now that will be playing in 2025. Makai Hughes would be a massive addition. We'll keep an eye on what Oregon's doing in the portal. Obviously, we got some bigger storylines over the next 72 hours. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.